there, and welcome to All About Everest podcast, episode 2, Are There Dead Bodies on Mount Everest? I am your host, Pauline Reynolds-Nuttall, and the answer is yes. There are over 200 dead bodies on Mount Everest. Looking at the statistics, there have been between 306 to 309 deaths total on Mount Everest. The numbers aren't 100% accurate because of the nature of the beast. However, the most reliable records are the ones found on the Himalayan Index. The most popular question on Google about Mount Everest is, are there dead bodies? So I thought that this would be a good topic for this next episode. Mount Everest really is a dangerous mountain to climb. Every time a climber attempts the summit, they are putting their life at risk. Some of the common causes of death on Mount Everest are falls, avalanches, seracs falling, exhaustion, exposure, extreme weather, and health issues caused by altitude sickness. In 1994, the statistic was 1 in 6 climbers would die, and now it's 1 in 20. This doesn't count the multiple ascents that many climbers have made. The majority of deaths have been in the death zone. This is the area above 8,000 meters. And also the majority of deaths have been when climbers have been descending after they summited or before they've even reached the top. It's extremely difficult to remove dead bodies from Mount Everest, especially if they are in the death zone. It's not only expensive, but it's also dangerous. The average cost of a recovery attempt is between $60,000 to $70,000. Even if you find someone willing to do it, it is very unlikely they will succeed. Because the majority of the deaths are so high up, the climbers are exhausted and cold. So imagine having to drag a dead weight behind you after exhausting all of your energy to get to the top to find them. It makes it even harder. Most bodies are usually left where the person died and have become part of the landscape and even landmarks. Many climbers actually prefer to be left on the mountain. If a body can be moved, it is moved off of the path and away from sight. Too many people die on the actual trail. Many corpses are dropped down crevasses or even buried under rocks. However, there are bodies that were never found or ones that are exposed years later. There are some very well-known or even famous bodies on Mount Everest of deceased climbers. There are plenty of pictures that you can find online. I did not include any of those in the show notes because some of them can be disturbing. Let's talk about the Rainbow Valley. When you think of rainbows, you may not be imagining the cold northern ridge of Mount Everest. The Rainbow Valley on Mount Everest isn't just one body. It's multiple bodies that have been dropped off of the northern ridge. The rainbow is the brightly colored suits of deceased climbers in vibrant hues of trashed tents. The Rainbow Valley is in the death zone, and it's unknown how many bodies lay there. George Mallory is considered one of the most famous dead bodies on Mount Everest. He originally disappeared in 1924, and there's a huge mystery of how he died, and maybe he might have been the first person to reach the summit of Mount Everest with Sandy Irvine. His body had been searched for many years and finally was found in 1999 by Conrad Anker. The body was mummified and left a lot of clues to what may have happened to Irvine and Mallory. He was buried by the climbers who found him. They were able to collect a lot of artifacts, but they never found the camera that he and Irvine were supposedly carrying. People think that maybe if they find that camera, that they'll be able to prove if he and Irvine had summited or not. Irvine's body has never been found, even though many attempts have been made. And there's a very well-known documentary that came out in 2020 called Lost on Everest. It's currently on the Disney Plus channel, and I would recommend that you check it out. It is really enlightening and interesting. When I use the word famous, it's actually in quotes. It just doesn't come over very well on the podcast, but it means essentially well known. And one of the most well known dead bodies on Mount Everest is Green Boots. Though he has never been 100% identified, it has been determined that Green Boots is most likely the body of the Indian climber Tsawang Paljor. He perished in the 1996 Everest disaster. And the reason why his body is so well known is because for years people used it as a landmark. He died inside not really a cave, but more like an overhang. And so people would actually rest near his body and use it as a guidepost along the trail. His body disappeared for a little bit and then it came back. My understanding that since then his body's been moved from the trail to somewhere else, probably down a crevasse or even buried, but it is unknown what happened to his body in the end, just that it's clearly not there anymore, which is a good thing. One of the most controversial deaths on Mount Everest is that of David Sharp. His body is still up there. David Sharp was a solo climber that attempted to summit Mount Everest in 2006 all by himself with no group, Sherpa, radio, or support of any kind. It is believed that he was coming down after he had possibly summited, and he was so exhausted that he took shelter inside Green Boots Cave. The controversial part of this is that while he was dying, it was originally thought that nobody stopped to help him. However, multiple groups and multiple people did stop. He seemed to be beyond help, without oxygen, hypothermic, taking off his clothes, and eventually determined that he had passed away. The whole thing was really brought to the light of the media by Sir Edmund Hillary, and he was pretty vocal about what he thought should have been done. He really thought that more climbers should have stopped and helped David Sharp, even though they did. There's a really good documentary about that whole season called Dying for Everest, and I really recommend that you watch it. Though David Sharp's body is still on the mountain, it was moved from the cave the following year because the family requested it, though it was only removed from eyesight. Two other dead bodies that are well known that are still on Mount Everest are those of Rob Hall and Scott Fisher. They also passed away in the 1996 Everest disaster, and they were portrayed in the 2015 movie Everest. Rob Hall was the owner of Adventure Consultants and also a guide. He passed away after summiting too late in the day with one of his clients, Doug Hansen. And Scott Fisher also was the owner of a company, Mountain Madness, and he appears to have died from exhaustion after summiting. Next week's episode is all about the 1996 Everest disaster. I think I'm going to split it into two parts because it is really long and detailed, but I'll go into more detail and all of the history about the 1996 Everest disaster, which was at one time considered the deadliest season on Mount Everest with the deadliest day. Hannelore Schmatz is probably one of the most well-known corpses on Mount Everest. She passed away in 1979. She was a very experienced mountaineer. However, she spent too much time in the death zone, and with the severe weather and exhaustion, she passed away. You used to be able to see her body. It was propped up like she was sitting on her backpack with her hair blowing in the wind, and it is one of the more recognizable images of Mount Everest and those that have passed away there. I am so sorry that I sound funny. I am fighting a cold and I think I am losing this battle. Another female climber that passed away on Mount Everest was 33-year-old Canadian woman Shreya Shaklorfin. She was born in Nepal and passed away on Everest in 2012. She made the summit, but she spent way too much time up there and ran out of oxygen. Her body was covered with a Canadian flag, and actually her body was brought down to Camp 2, even though she had passed away in the death zone. So even though you can remove dead bodies from Mount Everest, it's extremely difficult. I think one of the most tragic deaths on Mount Everest is that of Frances Arsenyev. In 1998, she set out to become the first American woman to reach the summit of Mount Everest without bottled oxygen. She was successful in that attempt. However, she perished on her descent. A lot of people tried to help her, including a team from Uzbekistan and the climbers Kathy O'Dowd and Ian Woodall. So many people tried to revive her and help her down the mountain, but they were unsuccessful. Ian Woodall returned the following year to move Frances's body. He covered her with an American flag and supposedly tucked a teddy bear under her arm and whispered a personal message to her from her little boy. After that, he slipped her body over the edge of the north face. So there you go. There are over 200 dead bodies on Mount Everest. One of the things that I mentioned earlier is that many of the climbers ahead of time will tell their families that if they perish up there, they want to be left up there. A weird story that I came across from 2019 was that several bodies had surfaced near base camp and they were sending them for DNA analysis. I haven't heard anything since, but that's definitely something that I'm going to follow up with. Don't forget to follow us on social media and check out the show notes on mamabearoutdoors.com. Rate, subscribe, and follow so that we can continue to provide awesome content. And check in with us next week for episode 3, which will be about the 1996 Everest disaster. It may or may not be in 2 parts just because there is so much information to go over. And I really want to thank you guys for listening to me while I have this awful head cold. I really appreciate it. The show notes are already up on my website, but they're not finished, so I should probably finish them tonight or tomorrow, but I think I'm going to go to bed. So have a great rest of your week and a good weekend, and see you next week.